Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. I'm sure we have all heard the Old Testament story of Jonah being told by God to go to the wicked city of Nineveh, only for Jonah to disobey and board a boat at Joppa, heading to Tarshish in an attempt to flee God. Whilst on the boat, there was a storm, and Jonah was blamed for the storm. The sailors cast him overboard. He was swallowed by a great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, only to be spat out on dry land unharmed. Suffice to say that the literal and historical interpretation of this story makes no sense, despite some theists trying to defend its literal meaning. Let's discuss the possible deeper meanings of this myth and what it represents, tracing back from the Bible to mythology to celestial metaphors and spiritual interpretation. Firstly, the Bible is not the source for this myth. The hero emerging from the belly of a fish or dragon is a common motif in mythological narratives across multiple civilizations. The Hindus have a myth in the saktideva Bharata about a man called Saktideva who was hit by a storm whilst on a boat, and a huge fish swallowed him whole and came out unhurt after fishermen caught the fish and cut it open. In Greek mythology, in the labours of Hercules, Hercules was said to have been swallowed by a great fish at a place called Joppa and to have been inside the fish for 3 days. Here we can see direct similarities in the myth. Joppa is the exact name of the place where the biblical Jonah boarded the boat, trying to flee God. And both Hercules and Jonah were in the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. There is yet another Greek myth about Arion the musician, who was thrown overboard a ship and was saved by a dolphin who carried him to shore unharmed. The great fish in the Jonah story was likely the Babylonian sea god Derceto, the whale of Der, who swallowed and gave rebirth to the god Ons, otherwise called Adapa, as a water god is an indication also of his solar nature, as his emergence from the sea occurred at sunrise, retiring back to the sea at sunset daily. You'll also note depictions of Ons as a man in the body of a fish, comparable to Jonah in the body of the great fish. It's the same symbology. The Finnish hero Ilmarinen was similarly swallowed by a great fish to be reborn. Swallowing by the fish indicates an initiation rite leading to rebirth. Biblical writers masculinized the image of Jonah, whose name means dove, for the dove was a symbol of female sexuality. There were many myths in circulation preceding the biblical story of Jonah, simply different versions of the same myth making its way into the Jewish narrative. So what do these myths represent? These myths have a solar celestial meaning, and the characters are personifications of the sun. The fish or sea monster being a personification of the earth swallowing the sun, which appears again after 3 days on the horizon, being the shore or dry land. This symbolism is very common in Polynesian mythology. These heroes remaining for 3 days and nights inside the fish represent the sun at the winter solstice from December the 22nd to the 25th, with the sun at the lowest point in the earth, the belly of the fish. And on the 25th it is cast forward and renewed. The theologian Dr. John Watts states, several myths and legends told of a hero being swallowed by a sea monster. Almost all of them have some parallel to Jonah's story. The sun myth pictured the descending sun in the west as being swallowed by a monster, only to reappear in the east. It was known in Persia and in Egypt. Jonah's parallel is that he travels west, is swallowed in the west, and returns in the darkness of the fish's belly to appear in the east. But if this myth had any influence on Jonah's author, he has changed it completely. Now it takes place in history with natural creatures in the roles, and testifies to the authority of God's word and will over creation and human history. As we peel back the layers, there is an esoteric interpretation. The journey that Jonah undergoes is simply moving from a lower state of consciousness to a higher one, and is written in allegory and symbolism. Jonah is you. Nineveh is symbolic of a lower state of consciousness or lower mind. Jonah is fleeing it because we usually choose to flee from the higher to remain in the lower egoic state. I always make mention of the significance of the numbers in the Bible, and the numbers and key words in this story are also very revealing. Jonah 1 verse 17, we have the infamous 3 days and 3 nights. The number 3 in mysticism simply means that a major transformational shift is taking place. Jonah has been totally consumed by the higher self and will be renewed or reborn after the symbolic 3 days and 3 nights. The sun in the sky follows a similar pattern when it dies or stands still during the winter solstice and then resurrects on December the 25th. Jonah 2 verse 6. Notice the reference to the bottoms of the mountains, which is a low place, which is symbolic of a lower state of consciousness. The earth with her bars is talking about lower emotional nature. Jonah 3 verse 3, 3 days journey, is once again a major transformational shift, which ties in with how Jonah has newfound wisdom and has been reborn and can now enter Nineveh as a different individual with a divine purpose. In other words, the lower mind no longer has him in bondage because the higher mind now has dominion. Jonah 3 verse 4. City in mysticism means consciousness. 40 days is just a sign of completeness, not an actual number of days. Your fourfold nature consists of the physical, spiritual, intellectual and emotional, which the number 4 is symbolic of. So in other words, all of us have to be committed to the process of overcoming the material or physical self to consummate with the divine within. This whole story is about you going within yourself in meditation to finally get it. You and only you can make the choice to rise above your lower nature by going within to discover your own divinity. To further show the astrotheology throughout the Bible, in the New Testament, Jesus, who is also a solar character, is identified with the solar hero Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Matthew 12 verse 40. When Jesus is asked by the Pharisees and Sadducees for a sign from heaven, he enigmatically answers, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign shall be given to it except the sign of Jonah." The sign, of course, is the sun. The biblical story of Jonah and the whale is not literal and not a historical account, but represents ancient mythology, celestial metaphor, and consciousness. Thank you.